Remember the rules of war, kids. Traitors first, then enemies. Hey kids, welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, hoping that you are having a great day. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about the classics. The classic TCG cards worth collecting, picking up, at least taking a look at. This video is more or less aimed at newer members of various TCG communities, whether that be Pokemon, Magic, or Yu-Gi-Oh! Usually those three. Of course, this conversation can extend to other card games that have been around for a while. Flesh and Blood, in particular, comes to mind. You see, I've been talking with a few people over the last few days and really soaking in a lot of content from other creators on YouTube as we talk about the reserved list for Magic the Gathering, the classic era and GX era Yu-Gi-Oh cards, as well as the WotC era Pokemon cards. And part of the discussion we really kind of veered towards was how much attention there is these days in the world of trading cards on the newest, hottest sets, the newest, flashiest cards, and just the new hotness, the new hype, the new FOMO, all the crazy stuff going on with the gravy train. Because, you know, it is a fact that there are more eyes on the world of card games now than there have been throughout the rest of the history of the industry. You know, back in the 90s, trading card games they had popularity, don't get me wrong, but the size of the market, the size of the player base for the various card games was not nearly as large as it is now. That's just the player base. I'm not even talking about collectors, investors, stores, etc. When you look at the sheer number of people playing, collecting, buying, cracking, etc., the various card games, especially the big three, and you take that number and use it to look into the past of these various card games, your mind starts to wander about, towards one specific thought process, okay? And that is, there is simply not enough of the classics to go around. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who have the mentality that newer cards are just all the hot rage, and that the older stuff is boring, it's stagnant, it's seen its price appreciation, and that a lot of the new players who are only going to be in these games for a brief period of time, a lot of them just aren't going to have any interest in the old stuff, right? I don't necessarily agree with the idea that just because most new players, new collectors, etc., aren't going to have an interest in it, even if that were true, I don't think that's a good enough reason to brush off the idea that, especially for older cards, products, etc., there is still a sincere scarcity to those items. Especially with some early Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. I don't know how to tell you this, guys, but there is a lot, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of, unlimited printing starter deck Pegasus, for instance. There's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of revised. There's a lot of revised era Magic cards out there, a shitload of revised cards. And there's a lot of base set 2 Pokemon, for instance. But the collectible stuff, the first edition starter deck Pegasus, the beta limited edition cards, and the shadowless first edition base set Pokemon, that stuff was scarce 10 or 15 years ago. And as the market grows, ironically, hilariously enough, that scarcity kind of becomes more evident as fewer and fewer mouths can get a hold of some of that older product. And when you zoom out you can kind of see where price appreciation and price plateauing has happened for a lot of these older cards. Just look at, like, oh, what's a good example? The LOB Dark Magician first edition, for instance, from way back in the day, or the starter deck Yugi one, which that's a fun one. I like that. I prefer the Yugi art to the LOB art. I know that there's some Yu-Gi-Oh collectors out there who will actually try to shout me down for that, but I do prefer the deck art. Just gonna put that out there for you guys. You know, first edition Dark Magician was rare 10 to 15 years ago. The Shadowless Charizard was rare 10 to 15 years ago. Beta Dual Lands were rare 10 to 15 years ago. And as more and more people enter the market, and as more and more people start playing and collecting these games, yeah, only a comparatively small amount of the new entries into the games are looking at those older cards. But as time goes on and more people enter the hobby, that small percentage of newer people looking at the old stuff, checking out reserved list cards, looking at some base set Pokemon, considering buying their first GX era packs, you know, that number is small, but it adds up as more and more people enter the hobby. And well, it's definitely true that prices can be very stagnant. I mean, look at the Egyptian God cards, the secret rares from the Game Boy promo, GBA promo. No, it was a Game Boy promo. That's right. Yeah. The secret rare God cards have been between $100 and $200 now for like 3 years, I think. But those are a genuinely rare piece of collectability. They aren't playable cards. They never were playable cards, but they're nice. They are the Egyptian God cards, 3 of the most iconic cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? And that specific printing of them is fairly rare. And they've just been hovering around $100 to $200, depending on which one, obviously, for a while now. As more and more people want to pick up a secret rare copy of Obelisk the Tormentor, how likely is it that it'll stay a $120 card? I don't think that's very likely. I think as time goes on and as more and more people, even if it's only a small percentage, if 100 new people get into the game, okay, of Yu-Gi-Oh, collecting Yu-Gi-Oh, and only 2 of them have even a passing interest in vintage Yu-Gi-Oh collectibles, and only 1 of them has an interest in the anime, and therefore the God cards, if that one guy, every 2 years, there's one guy every 2 years who gets into the game and buys a secret rare obelisk, how many secret rare obelisks are actually on the market? How many of them actually exist out there, right? That same mentality, that same thought process, carry that over to each of the other 2 games, and you kind of see where I'm getting at. Like, can you honestly say that if you were a Pokemon collector and you had money, obviously, you wouldn't be interested in a Shadowless Charizard? It's considered a trophy for a lot of collectors out there. How many of them actually exist? You know, same thing with Bayou from Beta, or Mox Pearl from Beta. The worst example, I suppose, but you get what I'm trying to say. You know, as time goes on, and as these older vintage cards become less and less accessible, how likely is it that those stagnant prices that we have been seeing for a lot of them for a while now, how likely is that stagnation going to keep going? And this really is a topic where I wish I could put my money where my mouth is, but obviously I'm paralyzed by indecision when it comes to things like this. I do wish I had the hundreds of thousands of dollars to dump into old vintage stuff, because I sincerely believe that a lot of this stuff is more plentiful than you'd think, but also rarer than you expect. And look, just as time goes on and as things happen, some cards disappear into personal collections where they are never going to be seen again. Some cards are lost or destroyed. House fire happens and burns someone's personal collection down, and that house fire takes out a entire Power 9 from Beta, right? Or a unlimited Power 9 even. Those are still nice. You know, as time goes on, those cards become rarer. And I know that the new hotness in Magic the Gathering is Final Fantasy collectibles, Lord of the Rings serialized cards, and all the shiny new stuff, right? I know that that's the big hotness that a lot of people focus on as they're brought into the hobby. I know for Pokemon, alt arts are a huge focus. Illustration rares are a huge focus. For Yu-Gi-Oh, I'm going to confess, I don't actually know what new Yu-Gi-Oh players are focusing on other than just building their decks up. Same as it ever was, right? But as more and more people enter the hobby, regardless of their reason for entering the hobby, some small percentage of those new players, they're going to be interested in the older stuff. And sooner or later, the older stuff that seemed cheap and affordable for the longest time suddenly isn't. And part of what brought this video along is about 4 or 5 years ago now, I bought the final major upgrade that I wanted for my Sliver Queen EDH deck. It was Survival of the Fittest. Fun card, and for the longest time I was debating whether or not it would be worth it to buy it, because I didn't think spending $50 on it's a nice engine, don't get me wrong, it's a nice card for the deck, but I didn't think spending $50 on it would be worth it. I don't know, how viable really was it? It's a good card, but like, do I really need it? But I did pull the trigger. I bought one, slopped it in that deck, and nowadays it's definitely not $50 anymore. It's a bit higher. And as more and more vintage cards, playable or just collectible, get bought by, in instances like that where someone's debating it for a while and they pull the trigger, you'll see that some of those prices hike. And then you'll have the other side of the coin where someone's waiting. They're debating buying a vintage card that's been sitting at like $50 to $100 for a long time, and then suddenly one day they look at their computer and Ancient Mew promo cards are no longer $20. And those were $20 for a very long time until suddenly they weren't. Crazy to consider that you can really let time pass you by when you're just kind of taking for granted where prices are at in a given moment, instead of considering not necessarily the wider game, but the numbers. There we go. The numbers to consider. The older the promo is, or the rarer the promo is initially, the less likely it is that a price tag can hold for the long term. And of course, prices go up, they go down, markets work like that. It's a fun thing. But in general, older stuff tends to appreciate well, not because it's old, obviously, but because there's a aspect of collectability to it. There are fond memories associated with it. And depending on the product, there is a genuine scarcity to it. So I don't know where I was really going with this video. I just wanted to talk about some vintage cards that I've been noticing lately have been either stagnant or slowly creeping upwards. And yeah, just remember that there's those old promos that a lot of people just kind of like hand wave off, like the Egyptian God cards or the Ancient Mew promo, or I don't know a good Magic analogy for this discussion. But third thing from Magic the Gathering, a lot of those promos that people just kind of pass over for their collections, especially those aren't promos are more common than you thought, but also rarer than you'd expect. And that applies to just a lot of the older cards. What I'm trying to say is, in this video, as I ramble on past the 10-minute mark probably, what I'm trying to say here is, no, there's no need to freak out and FOMO into the oldest vintage Pokemon stuff, Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, Magic stuff the moment you enter the hobby, right? But I am saying that for those of you out there who have been in the hobby for a long time, or who expect to be in the hobby for a long time, as you look at the newest stuff and as you look at the older stuff, yeah, there's value to be made here and there's value to be made there, and just take a look at the numbers, look at what's available, and what do you think is going to do better over the long haul? A proven collectible like old dual land, or the new hotness like Final Fantasy Surge foils? Which one do you personally think will do better? And follow your gut, but do your best to make the most educated decision when it comes to collectibles like this. I personally just have a lot more faith in the old stuff that's been tried and true for a long time. And I know that that can be a bit of a controversial opinion, because there's a lot of people with a lot of effort going into the new stuff right now. But how sustainable is that? I don't know. I don't know if I agree with the idea that shiny new hotness for every card game is going to do well forever. Especially with Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Keeps showing me that shiny new hotness is not working in comparison to the older stuff. So the Yu-Gi-Oh! Guys, you can ignore this because you guys already know it's the old stuff that's good. It's Pokemon and Magic that I'm more or less talking to. That's really all I got for you kids today. I don't want to be going in circles with this conversation. So thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, share, and subscribe as usual. I'd appreciate it so very much. And I'll see you guys in the next